Hey everybody, it's Dr. Wood, and today we're going to be talking about levels of literature. I know I've put you through in our time together some pretty hefty PowerPoints here. This might be the mother of them all, as it turns out. I'm just kidding, it's one slide. So I want to talk about different levels of literature because I've probably talked about this in passing without really giving it, a sort of proper explanation of what I'm talking about. And some of you may know this already. But for those of you that don't, I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we're all on the same page of a journal, as it were. Just kidding. So basically, when you're talking about primary literature, this is where the majority of your references are going to be coming from for your grad project, right? This is original research. These are journal articles that you're pulling from various journals. These are typically the more recent things you're going to be pulling from. So when you say, or when I say in the requirements that 5 articles within the past 5 years, almost all of these or all of them should be primary literature sources, right? So if you go to JAMA, that's the primary literature, right? Because they're directly publishing information from researchers that have just held a trial or some sort of experiment, right? You may find other types of, you may find dissertations, there could be conference proceedings that may also be qualified as primary literature. So for instance, my study that I did on coral snake envenomation, it was originally posted as a conference proceeding. It's actually one of the platform presentations that was given at the conference that year, and that actually got published before the actual article itself did later on. And so sometimes that's the fastest way to get information out there is with these different types of primary literature. Okay. Now, secondary literature typically is going to be utilizing the primary literature in order to sort of summarize and sort of collate all this information together. Tends to be more broad. It tends to be not maybe as up to date as you might think in terms of the primary literature, right? Primary literature is like hot off the press kind of stuff. Secondary literature maybe taking a sort of a step back, right? So for instance, when you think about up to date, that's a good secondary literature source because you have these content experts that are pulling together all these disparate pieces of information, putting it together, right? You could also think about things like meta-analyses as sort of being a secondary literature sort of piece there. Again, not to say that they couldn't be really strong articles, not to say that they're less useful than primary literature, but they may just be less up to date in terms of how recent they came out, right? So then the tertiary literature, this is basically going to be summaries. This is where you're condensing things down into more digestible pieces of information. Typically, this is pulling a lot of primary and secondary literature sources. The biggest place you're going to find this is like your textbooks, right? So for instance, and these are actually very useful for certain parts of your paper. So for instance, if you're writing your paper about, let's say, hypertension, it may be useful in your introduction to talk about the pathophysiology or to talk about the epidemiology of hypertension. This is where textbooks can come into play here, right? Because again, the pathophys of hypertension is fairly well known. You can use something like a particular textbook and pull that in and say, okay, well, here's the textbook source that says this, the RAS system is responsible for hypertension in some cases, right? That's a tertiary literature source. Good for background information, not going to be good for when you're trying to look at really up-to-date stuff, when you're looking at, trying to compare different trials together, things like that. Tertiary source is not going to be great for that. But those are the basic types of literature you're going to find out there. Again, the majority of your references should be primary literature, should be some secondary, maybe 1 or 2 tertiary. That's generally how they go in these grad project papers. Okay, so that's it for this section. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.